Following those of the host and not those of Clear Channel Broadcast.
All right, you got about 5 minutes before it starts playing.
Welcome to Caregiver Reality with your host, David Levy. David Levy brings more than 25 years of practical experience helping thousands of family caregivers find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse, a parent, or a loved one who is no longer able to care for him or herself, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, today's edition of Caregiver Reality and your host, David Levy.
Good evening, South Florida, my America and the world, I'm sorry. This is the Caregiver Reality Show. I'm your host, David Levy. I'm here with my co-host, Paul.
And a good evening.
And a good evening to you, too. And we're here to bring you information and to recognize the informal family caregiver. Thank you, Freddie. See, if I can't have somebody do this, I don't know what I would do. But for those of you that couldn't see it, he was adjusting my microphone. I'm a neophyte here. And Paul was just commenting that I'm wearing all green tonight in anticipation of St. Patrick's Day next month. All right. And so with those happy thoughts, Paul, how was your week?
It was an interesting week. I mean, as a spousal caregiver.
Yes. We'll limit it to that.
We'll limit it to that. Let me. The end of the story is I took a 90-minute nap this afternoon, which I haven't done in a long time. But
when did you turn 65?
Gosh.
All right, because with that comes a nap card.
You got a free nap in the afternoon?
Yes.
With Debbie and her lupus, one of the real things that we fear is an infection. And that's what seemed to have happened in the last week. Now, God knows how she caught whatever she caught, but she ended up with an upper respiratory, and that really took a lot of the life out of her. So really was more in bed, really more of the hands-on type of caregiving. If she had to go to use the restroom, making sure that she had some help along the way, that she didn't fall. And she's starting to feel better now. Went to the doctors, got some meds. It's the normal type of thing that from day to day you don't know what to expect.
Right.
How about you?
Well, ours was the usual week. However, today she went to the doctor because in spite of all of her other conditions of dysautonomia, etc., as I said last week, we're planning on knee surgery on the 11th. And so she went to get her pre-op blood work done, but she was too dehydrated for them to be able to effectively stick a needle in her arm. And so when I heard that, I said, you know, one of the things you have to do is stay hydrated. You have to keep drinking. And she said, I am. I said, no, you're not, because they couldn't take your blood. And so with that thought in mind, I said, where are you now? Because she drove today. All right. I think she's okay to drive for the moment. And she was at Kmart trying to find acceptable clothes for the nursing home. Because remember last week we talked about trying to figure out where we're going to go and what we're going to do?
Right.
Well, I gave a very skimpy explanation. And part of the planning is post-op, she's got to go to a nursing home in order to get good rehab, at least for the first week or two, and so that they can properly monitor the pain and a lot of other things. Now we're trying to work out the logistics of what happens next. And one of the issues becomes, can she come back home? Her daughter has volunteered her house, and the only reason that I would allow that to happen rather than bring her home is because my granddaughter has volunteered her bed, which is about 6 inches off the floor. And at home, we have a 4-poster that's about 5 feet off the floor, and there's no way she's going to get on it, and I'm not sure that we can do rehab and have her just camp out on the couch in the living room. I don't know that that's the greatest setting. So I'm working out some alternatives. I know this is not exciting the audience very much, but I will tell you that caregiving, it never, ever stops changing. I got a phone call this afternoon. I've had a client in one of the local nursing homes getting post-op from a hospitalization that had nothing to do with breaking a bone. And as a result of that, he's old, he's frail, but he's a fighter. And so I got a text from his son today who said Dad fell out of bed and at the nursing home.
Right.
And I said, what? Because we had all talked about a lower bed, a wider bed, mats on the floor, and none of that had been done. So as soon as I finished my support group, I ran over there to see what happened. I took a couple of pictures of them, and then I went to the nursing desk. And I said to them what happened. And I got so many conflicting stories, but essentially nobody knew what happened. And they just found him on the floor. And I said, well, how often were you making rounds? And I got this blank stare. And I do not have his durable power of attorney. Obviously, his son does, or his advance directive. So when I tried to ask more pointed questions about what was in the record, I got the HIPAA story. And so I couldn't ask beyond a certain level. So I called his son, and I had him call. And I knew what happened in the sense that he was found on the floor. I could see the bruise on his head. I had asked him, didn't you call 911? No, we thought he was alert and everything else. So I said, well, all right. And I said, did you call his doctor? Oh, he was here early this morning, made rounds, and saw him. I said, all right. So I called the son on my way to driving to pick you up to come up here. And he had just spoken to the same nurse I talked to, and she told him that they found him on the floor with a pillow under his head, sleeping next to his bed.
More comfortable, I guess.
Oh, with the biggest crock of nonsense I ever heard. And then I asked him, have you spoken with the doctor today, the son? And he said, I'm going to call him right now. And he called me back in the car just before I picked you up, and he said, doctor wasn't in. He doesn't come in on Tuesdays. So I caught them in two gigantic lies. That A, he fell out of bed, but he was sleeping on a pillow, and B, the doctor saw him, and the doctor was never there. Now, this is a very reputable facility, but I will tell you, and I will remind the audience, that a facility is only as good as the people that are in and working there, and taking nothing away from the fact that staff has worked very hard in places like that, but to have a gentleman of that age roll out of bed, and nobody knew about it for probably at least an hour. And to go from there and then try and tell the son he was sleeping on the floor and that the doctor had seen him, borders on, I won't call it negligence, but it's blatant lying. And I know enough to push when I have to. And I said to them, if this isn't true, I'm sticking it on the air. And I will not name names because there's no reason to start that, and I don't want to put the family in a difficult position. But I go in there almost every day to check on him. And I have found so many inconsistencies, as I do with most facilities. And I know what I'm looking for, and I know what to demand. And I will tell you, it's getting tougher and tougher to find places. And here we are, as I've always said, in the dead center of Palm Beach County, Florida, which has a ton of facilities, and you should be able to find centers of excellence. And I must tell you that it's very difficult. It may be because they're all packed for the winter, but there's no excuse for lying about it. You know, you just fess up and say, he fell out of bed. And so I demanded before I left that they get a lower, wider bed and put mats next to it. And for any of you out there that are dealing with a loved one who they cannot put side rails on in that rehab facility, then you must ask them to lower the bed and put pads alongside of it, so if he or she does happen to fall out of bed, they're not going to wind up cracking their head on the floor.
David, just to go back a little bit, because I think what you said really needs to be expanded upon a little bit, if you would, because I went through this with Debbie not long ago. This whole issue as a caregiver and fall risks. And now we have an audience nationwide and beyond over there. So if you find a loved one who is on the floor after an obvious fall, what do we do?
Well, the first thing that you need to do is go to the nursing station.
No, not in a nursing home, even if it's in their own home.
If they're in their own home, the first thing that I would do is I would not assume that that fall did not do anything. I would call 911. I would at least have them evaluated. I was very concerned when I saw the bruise on the side of his cheek that possibly had hit his head, maybe had a little vascular or a cerebral bleed. I found him to be alert, disheveled, but not totally disoriented. But I'm not doing a brain scan, and I'm not a neurologist, nor am I an ER physician. So the first thing I want to do, if I find that happening, is I want an expert opinion. And the first thing I do is not dial 911, get the EMTs there. They certainly understand, because in this day and age, what happens as a result of a fall. I wouldn't try and move them, because you have no idea if you're dealing with a broken limb, a fracture, a back issue. They should be allowed to be put on a gurney in the proper way and go and have it checked out. Some people may feel that, well, my loved one falls all the time. Well, that's a warning. If your loved one is falling all the time, you have to be doubly sure as to what is really going on. Are they having little mini strokes? Do they have no balance? People that have difficulty with balance, there's a thing that many rehab facilities have called a smart balance master. And it provides an uneven footing while you stare into essentially what is an eyepiece, so they can watch how your eyes work in coordination with your feet. And over a period of time, they use it a lot with stroke victims. And it's very good to help people regain their balance. But there are very basic exercises that anybody of any age can do. A matter of fact, today's Wall Street Journal, in the personal section, in the back, is a whole thing directed at 30 and 40-year-olds called How is Your Balance? And it shows what you can do. And the fact that we can't assume because we're a Gen X or a Gen Y that, you know, we're still in great shape, and balance is a very big issue. And one of the things that they were checking was, how well can you make a 360-degree turn with your eyes closed? What happens if somebody pushes you? Are you able to stay and maintain your balance? So anybody that's out there, and they also, I think, put it on the Wall Street Journal website today, it's worth checking out, because balance is a huge issue as we get older, and we don't realize it all the time. Sometimes it can be related to vision. Sometimes it can be related to hearing. Sometimes it is just your ability to maintain your relationship, spatial relationship of where you are to the ground you're on and to your surroundings. And so it's a very critical issue, and we have to be very careful that we don't allow ourselves to become too deconditioned, or our loved ones, to the point where we're constantly falling.
And again, you always speak to caregiving as being counterintuitive. I mean, as your loved one is laying on the floor, the first instinct
is to pick them up.
Is to pick them up, or they're going to tell you, "Oh, I'm okay, just help me up."
Right.
And it's really there that we have to really step out of ourselves and look at this situation and say, what's in the best interest?
Well, that's why one needs to recognize that if you've had a loved one who's fallen, or even if this is the first fall, you know, it's like a bad dog. You don't know that you have a bad dog until the first time it's bitten somebody.
Right.
And now you're on notice. So if you've had a loved one that's fallen, and especially if you find that they have fallen and landed face down, because many times that's an indication of a mini stroke, and that they couldn't get their hands out in front of them and they just fell forward. That's not the case in every situation, but in this day and age, especially with older people, and when I say older, it could be 60 and above, depending on whether you have osteoporosis and what your bone density is, a bone fracture, a spinal fracture, an arm break is not an unusual thing, and it can lead to all kinds of complications. So assuming that your loved one or whoever's involved says, "I'm okay," and they stand up and they say they're all right, really you have to think twice about it, and whether or not you're willing to take the risk that their conclusion about how they are and your assumption that if I stand them up and they're still okay, that they didn't have some other, intervening cause for why they fell. It's a very dangerous moment. And I'll tell you, my late son was an EMT, emergency medical tech, and was out there in the ambulances. And he was stationed in Delray, Florida. And one of the things that they had was constantly being called to pick people up. After a while, they knew who were the people that fell, because they can almost name them by first name when they would call in. But yet, they responded each and every time, because you never know when it's the big event and not just, I've fallen and I can't get up. So the hallmark of all of this is better to be careful and be cautious than to be foolish and then suffer the consequences of having something be more complicated than you could ever imagine.
And that's regardless of the age. This is not only the elderly or the frail. I mean, could be a young person who fell off a bike or...
Well, it is not outside the realm of a lot of things that we see, especially with young children who might have a seizure and fall down. We don't realize it. Petit mal, grand mal, somebody in their 20s or 30s. It could just be the fact that you slipped. You slipped on an ice cube. You slipped on a banana peel, and you fell down. Right. And, that could be a darn hard fall. And I don't care how good you are. Our bodies are what they are, and they're not really designed to land real hard on our backsides or to land and smack your head against the floor, because there are a lot of consequences to that.
Well, I know you had recently had a fall.
Yes, I did, and it greeted me for my 70th birthday. I took a fall in front of an office building that had a set of a walkway that was nothing more than concrete pavers dropped in beach sand, and they said, go around to the side of the building, and I stepped on it. The paver rocked. It caught my heel. I went up in the air and came down, and I'm still suffering the consequences of it. I had major dental surgery this past week, as I had told you, 2 bone grafts, 3 implants, and it will be ongoing for the next 3 to 4 months, even though the accident was 4 months ago. And it has taken a tremendous toll. I have had a very difficult time because I was flat on my back for almost 3 weeks trying to regain. You don't have any idea how quickly you become deconditioned and how quickly you lose body mass. And so I have been working very hard to build that back up, consuming a lot of protein shakes, and trying to do the best I can, because at the tender age of 70, I'm no different than anybody else out there. And I can be the victim of a bad fall, and I was. And the consequences are not only expensive, I may win the lawsuit, but I had to lay it all out in front. And right now I'm $25,000 into my teeth.
Well,
right.
Seriously.
I could have been driving a car for that.
Now, take that one step further. Suzette depends upon you for so many things. And during that time that you were flat on your back,
I had
you have a private practice. I mean, this was very impactful for you. How'd you deal with it?
Well, I dealt with the private. I couldn't do the support groups, so I found a couple of people that I've been training, and they jumped into the support groups. I had family. I needed to call in some home care to keep an eye on her, as well as to help me, because for a while I was actually using a walker, and boy, that's a big comeuppance. If you've never had to do that,
sure.
That really kind of reminds you that you're not a spring chicken, and when spring has sprung, your body goes with it. And so in trying to work around Suzette and my own issues, I had to call in the troops. But I had a plan. I knew afterwards, after I had a couple of days of realizing this was going to take some time, I then worked on my caregiver plan as to how we were going to do this until I could get back on my feet and try and plan for the contingencies. And there were more contingencies that I even recognized for myself. And that's why in speaking with you and saying, Paul, what about this and what about that, you were good, because you gave me more insight into a few things that I had just kind of overlooked.
Well, also, as you have spoken of in the manual, the caregiver's manual, it's really looking at 30, 60, and 90-day buckets as it applies to caregiving, because that really is about as far as we can plan.
Right. And just like today with my friend in the rehab facility, everything was running smoothly until he, quote, fell asleep on the floor. And so we're going on from there. But the best laid plans in caregiving almost invariably go astray. And you can't plan for more than 90 days out. And it really doesn't make a difference what kind of a disease you're dealing with. And as you know, I don't know, Freddie, did we get the link up tonight yet? With well, we've been working with the medical research charities, which represent 25 major.
Talk about that, if you would.
All right. Well, we only have a couple of minutes because we got to take a break at 7:30. I have a guest calling in.
Okay.
All right. So, but medical research charities is an umbrella for 25 very specific diseases like Alzheimer's, heart, breast cancer, etc. And they are the umbrella that helps them raise money. And they have come to us and asked whether or not we would help them by becoming their caregiver arm. And so Freddie, our producer, was in touch with their tech people to see about linking this show to their site as well as the CareGiver Reality website. I think we need to go to a break because I have a caller coming in that I think everybody will be interested in right after the break, so take it away.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse, parent, or loved one who can no longer care for him or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Are you feeling burned out, stressed, frustrated, and you just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, you've tried lawyers and mental health professionals, but now realize they don't have realistic practical answers. What you need is an expert non-clinical family caregiver, one with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. One who can help you provide
About 20 seconds.
for yourself and your loved one. His name is David Levy, and you can reach him at dlevy@caregivered.org. Caregiver ED is one word. Or call direct to 561-482-0086. That's 561-482-0086. This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy. You can call in to speak with David on air, toll free at 1-800-889-0267. That's 1-800-889-0267. Again, here's David Levy and more of today's Caregiver Reality.
Well, we're back, and no great surprise because it's an hour show and we're only at the half-hour mark. And while we're waiting for the caller, as I said, we're very pleased to be aligning ourselves with medical research charities, and it only drives home the point that it doesn't make a difference in caregiving what the disease is. 15% of what you need to know in caregiving is about the disease, and the other 85% is all about the practical problem solving and the issues that arise that nobody thinks about, nobody's had to deal with. It's an entirely different skill set. And so we hope to be able to help a lot of people by bringing them the information that we have. Okay, I see that our caller is on. Good evening, caller. Hello? Caller, are you there?
Hi.
Hi. And who is this? I know who it is, but why don't you give your name for the benefit of the audience?
Hi, I'm Marcia Teal. I'm the Director of Marketing at Arden Court's Memory Care Community in Delray Beach, Florida.
All right. And we've known one another for a long time. I do caregiver support groups there, and you and I collaborate on a lot of different things related to caregiving and dementia. And I'm very happy that you called in tonight. And one of the things that I wanted, because our audience is growing nationally, and while here we are in the center of a lot of things, I thought it would be informative for our audience to understand more clearly what it is that differentiates an assisted living facility and a memory disorder assisted living facility. Could you illuminate a little bit of that and kind of help our audience understand that not only do you market, but exactly what is a memory disorder facility that's assisted living?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, David, because it's very, very important for people to know the difference. And one of my pet peeves is that when people get diagnosed with a dementia, and they get admitted into a regular assisted living that would be inappropriate for them, all kinds of terrible things can happen. And so my goal is to educate people on the specialized type of assisted living for memory care. Now, of course, I've worked at Arden Courts for 14 years, and in my opinion, I think that we're the gold standard in dementia care, but there's a reason for that. And when you're looking at what constitutes differences of the different types of facilities, when someone goes from their home, they might start at independent living. From there, they might go to what we call a regular assisted living. When someone needs more care and they have memory loss, the next level up is dementia or memory care assisted living. And then from there, possibly the last stop would be a skilled nursing facility or the traditional nursing home, and then before they go to heaven. So that's the progression of someone through their life. And hopefully when someone has dementia, your audience would consider seeking out in their area a dementia-specific assisted living for many, many reasons.
All right, Marcia, I have a question. All right, I didn't mean to interrupt you in the middle because you were getting a good roll on there. But most of us, or some of us, understand that an assisted living facility is part of the continuum of care that may be located either by itself or as part of independent living, as you said, right straight through to a nursing home. But I know that when it comes to assisted living, without recognizing the dementia for the moment, it's really there to help with the activities of daily living, reminding them to take their medicine, making sure that they're eating, doing the basic reminder and helpful things. But it's not really a level of what I would call care as people understand it.
Correct, because you're right, it takes care of the basics. In a regular assisted living, they're not going to do a lot of hands-on care as far as what does this person need emotionally. Yes, the physical, they can, help with standby showers, they can administer medication, but it's more than that when you have a person with dementia. It's not just about the place to live and are they having a good time. It's about their emotional state. It's about giving them all parts of their being support from the community, from their spiritual aspect, from an intergenerational aspect, from their creative aspect, and drawing out of people that have dementia what they can do so that they can have a higher quality of life and self-esteem and be able to enjoy what they have left with what they can do, not what they can't do. It's a whole different mindset and a whole different philosophy of care.
I certainly understand that, and because I've seen so much of what goes on in an Arden Court. I've been doing support groups there for, I guess, 7, maybe close to 8 years now. And one of the things that's always impressed me is the fact that there is a consistent structure as far as what they're doing, when they're doing it, and I think from my observation that there's a lot of comfort, not only for the person with dementia, but for the family, that things happen in a very orderly way. There's a time to eat, there's a time to shower. I'm not trying to make it out to be the Army, but it seems to me in my world of looking at all of this, that a dementia patient, once they begin to realize, or when they have reached a level where they really can't put it all together for themselves, I think that there's a lot of comfort in structure. And that's the thing that's always impressed me about what you guys do.
Well, you're absolutely right. It's been actually proven by numerous studies that people with dementia do better with a structured program, because if you think about it, they're not able to figure out what to do, when to do it, how to get there to do it, motivate themselves to do it. And so unless someone has a structured day planned for them with activities and programming planned for them and invited to the community, invited to participate, encouraged to do so, you're going to have a person with dementia that's going to stay in their room in a regular assisted living, and they're going to get depressed because there's nothing going on, and they're not going to be motivated, or they're going to be afraid to step out and figure out how to get down to where they might want to go, but they can't navigate a elevator. They're not sure where. They're afraid. They become a little paranoid. It's not conducive to them with what they need. And so structure is very, very important. And when people are engaged with stimulating activities, it's going to improve them both physically and mentally. And that's why it works so well.
All right, Paul has a question for you.
Hi, Marcia. How are you
Paul.
this evening?
Great.
Marcia, what we've been speaking about so far is in terms of the patient. Talk a little bit about how you work with the family as a caregiver, because it's such a difficult decision for them to move them from their roof to your roof.
Right. It's actually most times harder on the caregiver when someone has to place into an assisted living than it is on the person coming in. And all of a sudden now they have to get their life back. They have to find something to occupy their time because they're not a full-time caregiver anymore. So it's very important to look at this disease in the whole family, because it is a family disease as far as it affecting the whole family. So caregiving is difficult. We take the burden off of the caregiver, but they're still very much involved, but they can be more now the spouse and not have to be the primary. They need to understand what they're looking for when they go looking for a proper place, and we try to educate them on what to ask, what to look for, because, it's not just about a pretty building. It's about what goes on in that building, who are the people that work there, what are their credentials, how long have they been there, and if you have the right place, you're going to have, as a caregiver, peace of mind knowing that you have placed your dear loved one in the best of hands. And that is the goal for a caregiver, to have that peace of mind, knowing that you don't have to worry every single minute of every single day.
Let me ask you a question. This is David again. Where do most of the clients that you get, come from? Are they from family that walked in the door? Are they from referrals from the professional community? Who kind of guides people to get to you so that you can show them what you have and go about hopefully bringing them in and giving them the kind of care that you're talking about? Where's that all come from?
Well, actually, it comes from lots of different places. Arden Courts has a good brand. We've been branded as the experts in the field of memory care. We do have 54 Arden Courts scattered across the United States, and we have a wonderful reputation. People find us online. We do have a website at arden-courts.com where they can take a virtual tour, kind of check us out online before they make that phone call. They come from walking or driving down the street and happen to see a sign, and they may have driven down that same road hundreds of times, but until they need what they need, they're not going to see that, and then all of a sudden they see it, so they'll stop in and say, I'm just curious. It's taking that first step is the most important, picking up the phone, taking the first step. Geriatric care managers refer to us, physicians refer to us. Physicians like to put their own parents with Arden Courts because they have that level of confidence with us. And so however you might hear about us, it's various ways. We get a lot of families who just can't help but tell others about us because they're very happy. So word of mouth is also a big referral source. But I would encourage people to ask so many questions. The more questions you ask, the better you're going to be equipped to find the best care in your location. Not every city has an Arden Court. Not every city even has a memory care community. So you have to really do your homework, and that's what we're about, trying to educate caregivers and help them. And I help a lot of people on the telephone, even if I can't help them in my own building. I'm always available to talk to them, educate them, help them in any way I can, and give them referrals so they can, use that to find the right answer for them.
Marcia, it's Paul again. You said earlier they should ask a lot of questions. What kind of questions should someone ask when they're trying to make that kind of a decision?
Well, if they're coming into a building, they're actually looking at the building, and, before they even ask questions, they need to take a look around, look at how clean the building is, look how it smell how it smells. Hopefully it's good. I've had people tell me they've gone to some places, and as soon as they walk in the door, they had a terrible smell, and they walked right out. And that's indicative of the kind of care that happens. And so once you get beyond the front door, you start asking questions of the actual people that work there. How long have the caregivers worked there? How long has the management been there? The longer the people are in place, the longevity factor is very, very important, because those are tried and true. Experience makes all the difference in the world. And because, of course, Art in Court, that memory care is all we do, we are the experts and have the experience to help the caregivers, help the families. But experience is of so much importance, because there's so many new places opening up as we speak. They're getting on the Alzheimer's/dementia bandwagon because it's becoming so prevalent. They see that, hey, we can make money at this because people need this kind of service. Well, they're popping up, and they're new, and they're pretty, but are they effective? Are they experienced? Do they know what they're doing? Do they have their policies and procedures, and is it tried and true? And you don't want your loved one to be the guinea pig in a new place. So these questions you want to ask: what's their score with the state? They all get surveyed. You want to find out what their deficiencies are. You want to find out what kind of background checks they do on their employees. You want to find out what kind of programming and how often and how much, and what kind of special programming that they might have that's dedicated just to memory care.
Marcia, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I have a question.
That's okay. There are a lot of questions people should ask.
Right. But you talk about a lot of new places popping up. And so when you first open, it's like opening up a restaurant. Until people go there and find out if the food's good, if the service is good, etc. So are you saying that you shouldn't be the first ones to move into a new facility, that you should let others figure out what the restaurant is all about before you go in? Because let's face it, when we go to a restaurant, we spent our lifetime up until that moment eating food. And so we know whether or not food tastes good, whether we like it, and we certainly can gauge service and the level of ambience and whether it's pretty or not. What do you do, and this is especially important in rural areas that are first getting? I had a client not too long ago that was waiting to put his significant other back with her daughter in Montana, and it was outside of Billings. And they had to actually wait for the first one to be finished before they could move in. So a lot of what we're talking about, especially in new facilities, we're at the dead center of things, but I would say that a part of the new growth is happening out there in some of the more rural areas. And sometimes you don't have a choice of being first because you don't have many alternatives to turn to. And as you said, there are 54 Arden courts, not 1,540. So what do you say to somebody when they're approaching a new facility?
Very good point, David. What I tell my families, especially the ones that don't have too many choices, first do the homework, ask the right questions. If you feel comfortable and it's a new place and it looks pretty and you have all your questions answered, go ahead and move in, but do it under what I call a respite stay or a trial stay, where you don't have to commit long term until you've tried it out for, say, 30 days or so, because you are there, you're the first, they're going to have their growing pains with you, and if it doesn't meet your expectations and they're not living up to what they promised, you don't want to have to pay an upfront fee, which most places have you pay an upfront fee, and then decide after you're there a while that you don't like it, it's not good, and you want to get out, and then you're going to have to forfeit a big chunk of money.
Sounds like a dating service.
My recommendation is just try it for a while, pay for 30 days and try it out.
Okay, well, I think that's word to the wise. What is, just out of curiosity, I know that Arden Court is pretty well established along the East Coast. I was looking for relatives of mine, as you know, in the Virginia, Maryland area, where you seem to have had a number of facilities. Where is growth taking place for Arden these days, as far as you know?
We're looking actually to expand in some of the areas where we already are, and that's because a lot of our Arden courts are facing waiting lists because we are popular. People want to get into us, and they're having to wait to get in. And so we're looking to expand what we already have so we can accommodate those that are in need. A lot of places have open rooms. They have availability. They're kind of desperate to get people in their door. They're giving specials. They're reducing rates. Be careful of that, because if they're reducing rates and doing specials and cutting their prices, that means they're going to be cutting services, and the residents will suffer because they have budgets to meet.
Right.
And so we're trying to expand to what we have to accommodate more people. And that's what we're looking to do right now in the near future, is adding on to what we have, because we have such a good product and a good service, and we want to try to help more people. All
right. Well, Marsh, I'm glad you called. I got one more question for you. One of the things from the time that the Delray facility opened, I recognized, and so does everybody else, that it's a very purpose-built facility. The rooms are designed a certain way. The whole layout with the various 4 cottages that have 14 or 12 rooms in a double, whatever it may be. And so therefore, you're not too big so that people lose the, kind of the hominess. I've been in places that have 100+ dementia patients, and they kind of get a little lost in the crowd. You seem to have found a comfortable number that works, that allows you to be effective, obviously have a bottom line, and still have the patient be the focus of what you're doing without getting lost in the shuffle. Are the new facilities modeled directly after the ones that I'm used to seeing?
Yes, we do have a model, and there's a reason for that, because the Arden courts were designed for 5 years on the drawing board before they built the first one, which happened to be in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. And the model works so well that they duplicate it all across the country. You can go into an Arden courts in Ohio, and it'll look like an Arden courts in Michigan. The home-like setting is very important, even though we have the medical component there. People that need to check it out, because it's an assisted living for memory loss, and it feels like home. It's wonderful for the families to visit, because they feel comfortable coming in and spending time there. Everything was designed in the building with the memory-impaired person in mind.
All right. I just want you to know, Marcia, that Freddie, our producer, while you were talking, clipped on a film from the West Palm Beach Arden Court, and there was your other marketing person, Sonny Netto, sitting and going through, and now they're dancing, and so people are getting a little clip, a little idea of what really goes on. And I must tell you, Sonny is an excellent dancer.
Let me tell you what, people that have dementia, they can still have fun. You don't have the kind of view that most people think when you get dementia, because we bring out what's left. We bring out the life. It's happy. It's comforting. It's a wonderful social environment. We take care of them, medically, but we take care of the whole person, and so we become like an extended family. And so residents can come in. They can do anything at Arden Court that they would do in their own home, as long as they're happy and it's safe. And families are just thrilled to death with what we have to offer. I'm not saying we're perfect, because nobody is perfect, but I think that Arden Court is.
I think you're excellent, Marcia. Nothing is perfect, but we have to say a perfectly good goodbye because we've got to finish.
I appreciate you having me on, and it's a passion of mine. I'd love to.
I'll tell you what, Marcia.
Help people.
Right. Do me one favor. You get one shot at this. Give us your phone number if somebody wants to talk to you, whether they want to move into an Arden Court or they just want a piece of your incredible knowledge. What's the number?
561-498-5552. And they can call us if they need anything, and we'll be very happy to help them.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you for coming on. I think you've done the audience a very big favor in explaining not only what Arden Court does, but the distinctions in what to look for when you're seeking memory care for a loved one. So I want to thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, David. Bye,
Bye,
Paul.
Marcia.
All right.
Thank you.
And so there you have it. She's one of the best people I've run across in this whole dementia field when it comes to being a marketer. Paul reminds me, and we, over the last 6 months or so, we have been tracking and discussing a gentleman by the name of Dr. David Hilfiker. You've heard me mention his name. He is an MD in Washington, D.C., and he's been writing a blog because he thought he had Alzheimer's. And actually, the National Institute of Health did a brain scan and did all the psychological testing and told him that he had it. Subsequently, a good friend of his who was a neuropsychologist reevaluated the testing and said, no, you don't. All right? You may have mild cognitive impairment, which is what we call a lot of the time that we have forgetfulness that's a little more than just a senior moment. And so last week, if you recall, we were discussing the fact that they were tracking a bunch of patients in Minnesota because they were all part of the Mayo Clinic health system that had mild cognitive impairment, and that some of them progressed to dementia. Some of them actually reverted back to not having mild cognitive impairment, and some kind of stayed in place. And so I sent the article because I wasn't sure that Dr. Hilfiker had seen it. And he wrote, not back to me, but he wrote on his blog today, and I just want to make mention of 3 things that he had to say. So he writes, so this Mayo Clinic report doesn't resolve any of the uncertainty about my future. The chances are good, say the study, that I'll get worse, but there's also a chance I won't. The reality is that, like everyone else, I don't know my future. The most important thing for me, however, is not to allow my emotional or spiritual balance to yo-yo up and down with each new research fact that bears upon my future. Statistics are only one kind of information. They only tell you what the odds are that something will or won't happen, not what the reality is. And he ends with, life goes on. And that's something that we try and bring out here in this show, that every time you hear a breakthrough, every time that you hear somebody or you see an article in the newspaper that we've cured something or that there's been a dramatic change, and everybody rushes out to find out what it's all about, and what we found is we have sensationalistic headlines, but we don't necessarily have data and information until you dive into the study. And then you found out that it worked on 3 mice and 2 glowworms. And I'm not being facetious, but that's usually where this testing starts, and the fact that a mouse maintain their cognitive capability is an interesting indicator, but we're talking about humans, and many times what we do with mice doesn't leap into what we can do with a human. So we have to be very, very careful. The diseases that are of dementia, especially the Alzheimer's type, we now understand much more clearly. They don't happen overnight. They didn't happen because you took something or you ate the wrong thing or, you were exposed to radiation. It's a process. It's a genetic process. It means your genes had an aberration that caused you to begin the progression towards dementia. And typically, it's 15 to 20 years of kind of percolating inside of you before we actually see it. And so it's so very important for you to realize that what we find in these very early, when they change a mouse around, and it's early in their brain, it's much later on when we finally see it in humans because we don't catch it at the beginning.
I think the point that Dr. Hilfiker made about not getting on that yo-yo of up and down, there's a lot to be learned in that statement because as caregivers, we so much want to see that improvement and we try to grasp at whatever we can. And I think that's really a great words of wisdom.
I think not only is it great words of wisdom, but, one of the things that we've been talking about, with the scourge of dementia the way it is, there are great centers of excellence and a lot of wonderful doctors and researchers that are doing some terrific stuff. But when you have something as fearful as Alzheimer's, there are a lot of people out there that are as unscrupulous as you could imagine. Just like in the old days when there was the gold rush and on the way there were the snake oil salesmen. There are a lot of snake oil salesmen that are out there. And I know people that have gone to practitioners, small p, thank you, that were charging tens of thousands of dollars a month to give medications and other kinds of cures that really amounted to nothing. But yet families that could afford it chased a cure, and it wound up being nothing but a bigger hole in your wallet. Just the way Marcia talked about taking a good hard look at how you evaluate a dementia facility. Don't just assume because somebody says, I'm a doctor, I know what I'm doing, I have a cure. I'll remind you, with dementia as prominent as it is in this country and the world, when somebody really comes up with a cure or something that demonstrably can be proven to slow down the disease, you will see the world beat a path to their door, and they will not be able to handle the billions of dollars that will be created. In the meantime, don't believe what you read and what you hear until you've checked it out. And that's part of what this show is all about.
Right.
We do the homework so that you can understand how to make wiser choices with the information that we give you. And, in closing, I want Paul to have a couple more words. We only have a minute. So, Paul, why don't you close the show for us?
Okay. Well, I'd like to close by saying that caregiving is something that is not intuitive to us. We're not born with that gene, but we find ourselves in those circumstances, and sometimes it is really hard. It's very difficult to share what we're feeling sometimes with other family members who actually may be part of the caregiving problem. But in the end, it really is finding support for what you're doing and understanding that you are not alone. You are not alone, and there are people out there who want to help, and that's what we're all about. This is a passion.
Right. It is a passion, and I want to say good night, South Florida, America, and the world. This is the Caregiver Reality Show, and we'll be back next week, and hope you'll be listening and watching.
Have
Thank
a great
you.
week.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Reality. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist with over 25 years of experience providing practical, realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one unable to care for him or herself. To reach David Levy online, go to info@caregiverreality.com. See you next week on Caregiver Reality.
News, traffic, weather, every 10 minutes from 6 a.m. until 3 p.m. 1230 WBCT. West Palm Beach.